Welcome back to Targets in Focus. Today I'm joined by Henrik Gullberg at Deutsche Bank to discuss his outlooks on the performance of the euro-pound and the euro against Scandinavian currencies, the Swedish krona and the NOK. Thank you for joining me, Henrik. First of all, let's look at the euro-pound and the current strength of the sterling. What are your views and predictions on this currency pair?
Obviously, I think much of the rally we have seen in sterling over the past 1 to 2 months was initiated by the market taking out some of the probability of further quantizing in the UK. And I think that sort of positive aspect will continue to maintain if you look at euro sterling down at these levels, which I think represent the lower end of the range that we have seen in euro sterling for some time. However, having said that, data since has been very disappointing in general, and you've also seen that in rhetoric and comments coming out of the Bank of England, where members, they have changed their tone, and with even the more hawkish board members basically acknowledging that they may have been premature in ruling out further quantizing. So that's why I think that we are close to the lower end of the range in euro sterling, and if you look at my 3 and 12-month forecasts, they are slightly higher than current levels. What will help sterling, though, despite the fact that I think we are very likely to see further quantizing in the UK, is the fact that sterling is seen as some sort of safe haven for investors, at least seen as an alternative to the euro, which is also very evident if you look at central bank diversifying, with the share of sterling, generally speaking, increasing the share of overall FX reserves if you look at central banks around the world. We had the last example of that from the National Bank of Poland yesterday, where sterling-based assets, they rose to 15% last year in 2011, and that's up from 13% in 2010. That aspect will continue to be supportive of sterling, but against that we have a very weak economy and the probability of further quantizing that will kind of cap the upside in sterling going forward.
Over the last week, the Swedish krona has been the best performing G10 currency, followed by the US dollar and the NOK. Why do you think these two Scandis are performing so strongly at the moment, and what are your forecasts for these currencies?
Theme is to some extent similar for, if you look at both the Scandis and for sterling to some extent, i.e. investors are searching for alternatives to the euro. So you could say to some extent at least that even the Scandis, which are quite relatively small and liquid currencies, they have achieved some sort of safe haven status, which is very evident if you look at flows into debt securities over the past 1 to 2 years. We have seen record inflows into both stocky and NOK debt securities, which is reflective of, like I said before, for sterling, of the sort of safe haven dynamic that has changed, in particular for the Scandis over the past couple of years in response to peripheral concerns. And again, this is also evident if you look at central bank diversifying. Again, if you look at National Bank of Poland, the numbers we got from them yesterday, if you look at NOK assets, they rose from 0 in 2007 to 5 to 6% in 2010 and 7% in 2011. So there's a lot of diversifying flows going into the Scandis, and that is very supportive. And the big difference, if you look beyond the next month or two, if you compare the Scandis with sterling, though, is that the Scandis are not really undermined by further policy easing. We had more numbers this morning out of both Norway and Sweden, and they came in stronger than expected. There is basically no real output gap in these economies. There is no need for the central bank to ease policy aggressively further from current levels. Also, if you look at valuation, they are both looking reasonably cheap, especially the Swedish krona. Because of that, I think we will see continued drift down in euro stocky and euro NOK, as per my forecast over the next 12 months.
Do you think the sterling or the Scandis will suffer if Europe's economic crisis deepens?
No, obviously, the big caveat here is what will happen in the periphery. But again, it's kind of difficult to see sterling as one of the few major alternatives to the euro suffering from an implosion in Europe. At the same time, it's also very difficult to see even the smaller and illiquid Scandinavian currencies suffering, given that they are two of the very few these days AAA-rated Western or developed economies in the world. It's kind of difficult to see that they would sell off sharply in an environment where we see a further turmoil in the Eurozone, which would have been the case in the past. But I think that sort of dynamic has changed, and even the Scandis are now more safe haven than they used to be.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for sharing some of your latest projections. Stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for more exclusive interviews, but for now, goodbye.